Vice President Kamala Harris pushing back at Donald Trump and these MAGA Republicans is pitch perfect, calling them creeps, calling them weirdos, exposing their threats to democracy, and then talking about the policies that benefit the American people that the Harris-Biden administration provided. Let me just show you what Vice President Kamala Harris is doing, and I love that she's going on the offense. Here's a press release that she issued July 27th, 2024. Statement on Donald Trump's unhinged speech in Minnesota. Harris for President spokesperson Sarafina Chitika released the following statement after Donald Trump's speech in Minnesota. Tonight in Minnesota, a bitter and unhinged 78-year-old convicted felon kept clinging to his lies about the 2020 election he lost, being rigged, rambled about his former opponent, and golfing and made excuses for why he's afraid to debate Vice President Harris. Donald Trump said that if he loses, our country is finished. Yesterday, he promised the end of democracy if he wins. Then there's this statement on Trump's promise to end democracy. When Vice President Harris says this election is about freedom, she means it. Our democracy is under assault by criminal Donald Trump. After the last election Trump lost, he sent a mob to overturn the results. This campaign, he has promised violence if he loses, the end of our election if he wins, and the termination of the Constitution to empower him to become a dictator to enact his dangerous Project 2025 agenda on America. Donald Trump wants to take America backward to a politics of hate, chaos, and fear this November. America will unite around Vice President Kamala Harris to stop him. By the way, this first in Politico's playbook. In the 2 days since Biden dropped out, Vote.org saw its highest levels of new registration of the whole cycle. This was a few days ago. 38,500 people signed up, a 700% spike, and higher even than when Taylor Swift made an Instagram post. Most were 34 and under. And by the way, that's now over 100,000 new voters since President Biden withdrew from the race as of this morning. 84% are younger voters, ages 18 to 34. 18% are 18-year-old voters. The top 10 states for new voters are Texas, California, Florida, New York, Illinois, Ohio, Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. Vice President Kamala Harris's team put out this release. J.D. Vance is a creep who wants to ban abortion nationwide. J.D. Vance's obsession with controlling women's most personal healthcare decisions, from voting against protecting access to IVF, to advocating for tracking women's menstrual cycles, to calling for a national abortion ban to bar women from traveling to access the care they need, isn't just bad policy, it's creepy. It's unacceptable, and voters won't stand for it. Women have had enough of the Trump-Vance Project 2025 ticket threatening to block access to critical health care, and they're going to shut it down by sending Vice President Kamala Harris to the White House. And then the Kamala Harris headquarters wrote the following: to Trump and his Project 2025, we are not going back. We are not going back. By the way, more and more information's being unearthed about Shady Vance. So for those who don't know, Shady Vance, Donald Trump's VP pick, changes his identity every 5 to 7 years. He's changed his name 3 times. He grew up and he said that he was gay, and then he became anti-LGBTQ+, an extremist. Then he reinvented himself and said that he was a hillbilly, even though from Appalachia, even though he is from the suburbs of Cincinnati. He lied about that. And so he branded himself as basically the anti-Trump hillbilly. and then gave tours and speeches at various universities. And then he had to reinvent himself to be a Trumper. Now Shady Vance's former friends are just sharing who he was in one of the iterations of another one of his phony identities. The Daily Beast reported longtime trans friend of J.D. Vance, Sophia Nelson, released a trove of emails and texts from Vance in which Vance trashed Donald Trump and the late Justice Scalia, said he hated cops, and said his wife had no ideological chops. A direct quote from Shady Vance, now as Donald, which was now unearthed as Shady Vance changed his personality. Back in 2014, Shady Vance said, and this is a quote, "I hate cops," is what he said. Vance's longtime and by the way, today, Donald Trump and Shady Vance are saying that they would give absolute immunity to cops no matter what it is that they do. They engage in crimes, doesn't matter. They would get absolute immunity from any criminal conduct at all whatsoever, no accountability. That's what Donald Trump said. And you go, oh, they couldn't possibly say that. Let me just show you. Here, play the tape.
That we're going to give immunity to police so they can do their job. I'm giving federal immunity to police officers so they can do their job.
And by the way, look, I think that law and order is very important, okay? And, I think that there is very important to support law enforcement. However, if they commit crimes, if they shoot unarmed people, if they engage in excessive force and misbehave, there needs to be accountability. What are we even talking about here? So in Donald Trump's vision for this country, to be clear, his dystopic, despicable vision is he has absolute immunity the Supreme Court gave him, and then to basically allow a Trump militia, because that's what he's really saying, he would want his own militia to go out and kill people for him. That's actually what he's articulated before the United States Supreme Court. Vance's longtime trans friend Sophia Nelson further released documents that Vance regarded Trump as a demagogue and voiced views impossible to reconcile with any Republican orthodoxy. He said Vance backed compensation for redlining, said Justice Scalia was homophobic and a very shrill old man, and Scalia's concept of judicial minimalism was a political charade. Nelson says Vance brought her baked goods after transition-related surgery. Vance's marriage as well was to a Hindu. And so now J.D. Vance is changing again his entire personality, but Vice President Kamala Harris calling him out for it. This is a post that was unearthed from J.D. Vance 2021. Vance does not couch his hatred for women, and then calls him out right there. They put out the statement of Donald Trump's promise to end democracy as well, putting out statements over and over again, calling this out. Now, let me just show you things, because I know a lot of people may be just tuning in to this political zeitgeist. So here's what I want to show you. Number one, Donald Trump changed the words of the national anthem and replaced America's national anthem with a song by the January 6th insurrectionists. Donald Trump calls them the J6 Choir. And at all of his events, he plays the J6 Choir anthem instead of the national anthem. Again, these are some of the most violent insurrectionists who tried to kill police officers. So Donald Trump plays the song, and then he brags and lies and says more people listen to the J6 Choir than Taylor Swift. Here's Donald Trump saying that. Let's play this clip.
And they asked me whether or not I would partake and do the beautiful words, and I said yes, I would. And you saw the spirit. The spirit was incredible. And when that came out, it went to the #1 song. It was beating everybody. It beat Taylor Swift. It beat Miley Cyrus, who was #1 and 2. They were #1 and 2. We knocked them off for a long time.
What Donald Trump then also does at his speeches is he then says that this is what he was saying to President Biden. He would say, Joe, Release the hostages, the J6 hostages. Release them, Joe. Here, play the clip.
What they've done, and they ought to, you know what they ought to do? They ought to release the J6 hostages. They've suffered enough. They ought to release them. I call them hostages. Some people call them prisoners. I call them hostages. Release the J6 hostages, Joe. Release them, Joe. You can do it real easy, Joe. This guy, what he's done to people. And
then what Donald Trump also says that he would do is that he would consider pardoning the Proud Boy leader, Enrique Tario, the racist convicted felon. That's who Donald Trump would pardon. Play this clip.
Proud Boys leader Enrique Tario was sentenced to 22 years in jail. Now that you know what the sentence is, 22 years in jail, will you give him a pardon? Will you give other Proud Boys a pardon?
I don't know him. I never met him. I never heard of him until I started reading this stuff.
Will you pardon him?
But I want to tell you, he and other people have been treated horribly.
Will you pardon him?
In Minneapolis, I'd certainly look at it. I'd look at that, and I'd look at all the other people that have suffered, the J6 people.
And by the way, a lot of people don't know this. Before the insurrection, guess what? Enrique Tario, guess where he was hanging out? In the White House residence. How do we know? There are photos of it from 2020, December 2020, of Enrique Tario like hanging out and partying in Trump's White House. Like, how despicable can you get right there? It was before the insurrection. Okay, so that's what Donald Trump's views are there. Now, Donald Trump also gives speeches, which he does, which you heard him recently, where he said that Christians, he goes, I'm not a Christian, but I want my Christians to vote just this last time, and then you'll never have to vote again because I'll fix elections so they'll no longer be voting. What Donald Trump says. Here, play the clip.
And again, Christians, get out and vote just this time. You won't have to do it anymore. 4 more years, you know what? It'll be fixed. It'll be fine. You won't have to vote anymore, my beautiful Christians. I love you, Christians. I'm a Christian. I love you. Get out. You got to get out and vote. In 4 years, you don't have to vote again. We'll have it fixed so good you're not going to have to vote.
And by the way, you may say, Ben, there's no way that Donald Trump's lawyers were arguing that they could actually have the military kill people and get immunity for it. Okay. You want me to, why don't I show you the oral argument in front of the Supreme Court where Donald Trump's lawyer argued precisely that. Here, play the clip.
Ordered SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival. That's an official act in order to SEAL Team 6.
He would have to be and would speedily be, impeached and convicted before the criminal prosecution.
What if he weren't? There would be no criminal prosecution, no criminal liability for that.
Chief Justice's opinion in Marbury against Madison and our constitutional tradition and the plain language of the impeachment judgment clause all clearly presuppose that what the founders were concerned about was not.
I asked you a yes or no question. Could a president who ordered SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival who was not impeached, would he be subject to criminal prosecution?
If he were impeached and convicted first. And
so your answer is no.
My answer is qualified yes. There's a political process that would have to occur under the structure of our Constitution, which would require impeachment and conviction by the Senate in these exceptional cases.
So what I'm showing you here is the Donald Trump articulating fascism and the threat to democracy that he exists. And Donald Trump's response to that now is only, look, a bullet hit my ear, and therefore I took a bullet for democracy. That's what he wants to repeat over and over again. By the way, this is what his ear looks like now, to be clear. He's not even injured, just to be clear. Now, the incident was serious, undoubtedly. What happened in Butler, Pennsylvania, let's say undisputed serious event. We took it very serious in our coverage. How did Donald Trump respond? He sold within 24 hours before calling the widow of someone who died there, who was a Trump supporter, who refused to take President Biden's call, who called right away because her late husband hated Biden because he bought into all the Trump propaganda. What did Trump do? Well, first he called RFK to say deranged things about vaccines. Then immediately thereafter, within 24 hours, Trump started selling assassination attempt merch. Trump sold assassination edition sneakers for $299. He's sold 5,000 of them, or I'm not sure if they've even sold, to make $1.5 million off, and he turned it into a grift. That is who he is. Now, I could give you data point after data point, but that's why when Vice President Kamala Harris says, we're not going back to that, it resonates with me. Let me show you the video that we created at the MeidasTouch Network. Here, play the clip.
Donald Trump wants to take our country backward, but we are not going back. We are not going back.
Tear gas was used to remove peaceful protesters from Lafayette Park.
The president setting up this photo op for himself, dispersing peaceful protesters. He's holding up a Bible.
This is a mass grave being dug for coronavirus victims at New York City's Potter's Field.
They were peaceful people. These were great people. The love in the air, I've never seen anything like it.
A group on one side and you had a group on the other. Very fine people on both sides.
You can do anything. Grab them by the pussy.
I was able to terminate Roe v. Wade.
We are not going back.
Let's not go back to that. Vice President Kamala Harris, keep going on the offense. Hit subscribe. Let's get to 3 million. Thanks for watching.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Meidas by signing up to the MeidasTouch newsletter at MeidasTouch.com/newsletter.